My name is Zoe Harper. I'm 65 years old, a retired nurse from Vermont, and until recently, I thought I understood every kind of pain a human heart could carry. But I was wrong. Pain looks different when it comes from the child you raised with everything you had. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that their cruelty felt like a betrayal of your own soul, then maybe you'll understand what happened to me. Stay with me through this story, and if you find something of yourself in it, don't forget to follow this channel. Stories like mine are reminders that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means survival. That afternoon was supposed to be ordinary. The kettle hissed, rain clung to the window, and I had set out 2 cups of tea, hoping my son and his fiancée would talk calmly this time. Liam had always been restless, a man chasing success that stayed just out of reach. I could see the tension before he spoke. His jaw tightened the way it did when he was cornered. Tessa sat beside him, her manicured fingers wrapped around her phone, glancing at me as if rehearsing a line she didn't believe in. "Mom," he said, "we need $20,000, just until after the wedding." His words dropped like stones into the small kitchen. 20,000. I still had the echo of his father's funeral bills in my memory. I looked at Liam, the boy who once brought me wildflowers from the edge of our fence, and saw only a stranger wearing my son's eyes. "Liam," I said softly, "you already borrowed 5 last spring. I can't give you more." Tessa's smile vanished. "It's just money, Mrs. Harper. Family helps family." Family helps family. The words stung because they used to mean something real. Now they were currency for guilt. I stood my ground, trying to keep my voice steady. "I worked 40 years for that savings. It's not for a party." The air in the room thickened. Liam pushed back his chair so hard it scraped the floor. His face reddened, veins pulsing along his neck. "You're worth nothing!" he screamed. The words tore through the house. Before I could breathe, his hand struck my face. The sound was sharp and final, like glass cracking under heat. For a moment, the world tilted. I tasted metal, blood from my lip, and saw Tessa's shocked reflection in the window. She didn't move. He shouted again, but I couldn't hear. My ears rang, and I felt myself folding, collapsing into a silence so deep it felt like a room I had lived in before. I think I whispered his name, but he was already storming out, cursing about how I had ruined his life. The door slammed. The house went still, except for the rain and the faint mechanical blink of the camera light above the doorway. It had been there for months, one of the small security systems I'd installed after hearing about break-ins nearby. I hadn't thought it would capture this, but it had. Every word, every blow. I lay on the floor for a few minutes, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, the distant thunder, the taste of iron mixed with the smell of wet earth through the open door. I pressed my palm against the bruise forming on my cheek and forced myself to sit up. My body trembled, but not from fear. Something colder, clearer had begun to move inside me. When I stood, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. My reflection looked smaller than I remembered. There was blood on my blouse, and my left eye was swelling. But behind the damage, there was something else. Stillness, a kind of quiet that didn't ask for pity. I wiped the blood from my mouth and walked to the kitchen sink. The water ran red for a moment, then clear. On the counter, Liam's untouched cup of tea had gone cold. I stared at it and felt something close to mourning, not just for him, but for the years I had spent excusing him, protecting him, believing that love could erase cruelty. In the silence, the memory of his words replayed. "You're worth nothing." I turned toward the hallway camera. Its small red light blinked once, steady, unjudging. "We'll see," I whispered. Later that evening, I sat in my armchair, an ice pack pressed to my cheek. The house smelled faintly of rain and tea leaves. Outside, the storm had quieted, leaving drops sliding down the window like threads of silver. I opened my old laptop and accessed the security feed. The screen flickered to life, showing my kitchen from the corner ceiling angle. I watched it play, the scene I had lived hours before. Liam's raised voice, the strike, my fall. My breath caught when I saw Tessa's expression in the background. Fear, confusion, shame. The footage ended with the front door slamming and the camera light still pulsing like a heartbeat. I saved the file and backed it up twice. One copy to an external drive, one to the cloud. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I held. Proof. The kind that couldn't be argued away, not even by a son. The house seemed to breathe differently after that. Every sound, the creak of wood, the hum of the fridge, the distant clock, felt sharper. I realized that silence, once something I dreaded, had become my companion. It filled the spaces where apologies should have been. When the phone rang later, I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear him explain. The bruise on my face did all the talking I needed. I sat back and watched the rain begin again. Somewhere deep inside, under the ache, there was a single clear thought. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something he didn't see coming. Before midnight, I opened a blank document and typed one sentence. If they ever doubt your worth, show them truth needs no noise. I saved it beside the footage and turned off the light. Outside, the camera blinked in the darkness, patient and alive. It was the only witness I needed. Morning light seeped through the curtains, pale and hesitant, like it was afraid to touch what had happened here. I woke with the kind of ache that doesn't belong to muscles. It lives somewhere deeper, behind the ribs, where disappointment turns into something solid. The side of my face was tender, swollen, the skin around my eye purpling into something between dusk and forgiveness. I didn't cry. Tears would have felt like permission, and I wasn't giving him that. The kettle whistled again, same as yesterday, pretending nothing had changed. I moved slowly, one careful step after another, my bare feet against the cold wood floor. The mirror in the hallway caught my reflection. The bruise had bloomed overnight, but it wasn't the mark that held my gaze. It was the expression, calm, almost detached, as if I were observing a patient in recovery. Maybe that's what I was now, a patient of my own past choices. A knock startled me. It was Marlene, my neighbor from across the street. She stood with a casserole dish wrapped in foil and concern etched into her face. "You all right, Zoe? You look like you took a fall." I smiled, the kind that hides pain beneath routine. "Slipped near the sink last night. I'm fine." She frowned, but didn't push. Marlene knew the language of dignity. She placed the dish on the counter and touched my arm gently. "Call if you need anything. Anything." When the door closed behind her, silence returned. Soft, almost tender. I carried the casserole to the table and sat beside my laptop. The small external drive lay next to it, labeled in neat handwriting, "Front door camera, living room feed." I opened the folder and pressed play. The footage rolled again, the same explosion of anger, the same helpless fall. But this time, I watched it differently. The shock was gone. What remained was evidence, clean and unarguable. I called Julia. Her voice, calm and crisp as winter air, filled the room. "Zoe, are you safe right now?" "I am," I said. "But I need your help. I have something you should see." When I told her about the footage, she exhaled sharply, not in surprise, but in recognition. You did the right thing by not confronting him again. Don't call him. Don't text. Keep everything exactly as it is. I'll send you someone who can handle the evidence properly. Someone? An investigator. Former cop. Trustworthy. All right, I said quietly. What should I do until then? Nothing, Julia replied. Stay silent. That's your strongest move right now. The word lingered in the air, silent. I looked toward the camera above the hallway door, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. It felt almost alive, watching, protecting. For years, I had filled every silence with forgiveness, explanations, excuses. Now silence had turned into armor. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning the house in small, deliberate motions. The bruise on my cheek throbbed every time I bent down, but the ache reminded me I was still here. I wiped the counter, washed the cups from yesterday, even polished the old photo frame on the mantel. Henry's picture, my late husband. He had been gone 12 years, yet his eyes still carried that patient warmth, the kind that steadies your breathing. I touched the frame gently. You wouldn't believe what he's become, I whispered, but I think you'd be proud of what I'm about to do. By noon, the clouds had cleared. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching the edge of the camera lens. I sat at the table with a notepad, listing things I needed to remember. Contact Ethan, Julia's referral. Backup footage to Second Drive. Avoid contact with Liam. Schedule appointment with Dr. Shaw. Each task felt like a rung on a ladder, something to hold on to while climbing out of a deep hole. At one point, my phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a full minute before locking the screen. The apology felt hollow, a reflex, not a reckoning. I didn't delete it. I wanted it there, frozen in digital ink, a monument to everything left unsaid. The afternoon light shifted across the room, warm against the wooden floor. I brewed another cup of tea, this time for myself alone. As the kettle hissed, I thought of Julia's voice again. Stay silent. It wasn't passivity, it was preparation. When the phone rang later, I let it go to voicemail again. The machine clicked, and his voice filled the kitchen. Mom, please call me back. It got out of hand. I didn't mean... He hesitated. I just need the money, please. I pressed stop before he could finish. I couldn't listen to excuses dressed as apologies. I wasn't that woman anymore. The one who thought love meant covering for someone's cruelty. Outside, Marlene's wind chimes whispered in the breeze, their soft notes blending with the sound of distant traffic. I sat in the quiet, feeling my heartbeat slow to match the rhythm of the house. The fear was still there, a small shadow at the edge of thought, but it no longer owned me. That night, before bed, I checked the locks, then stood in front of the hallway camera. For the first time, I didn't feel watched. I felt witnessed. I spoke softly, not to the camera, but to the darkness beyond it. You told me I was worth nothing, but the truth doesn't need noise to be heard. I slept without nightmares. The next morning, sunlight found its way through the curtains again, stronger this time, filling the room with a kind of fragile hope. My phone buzzed with a message from Julia. Ethan will visit tomorrow morning. Keep your files ready. I closed my eyes and let the warmth of the light wash over me. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the beginning of something close. The next morning began with the sound of tires crunching over the gravel driveway. I peeked through the curtain and saw a white sedan parked by the gate. Tessa stepped out first, her beige coat, immaculate, hair pinned, expression measured. Behind her, Liam adjusted his tie like a man trying to remember what respect looked like. They stood side by side on my porch, the perfect couple, framed by the soft light of late morning. For a moment, it almost looked like a photograph. Then I remembered the bruise on my cheek and the taste of blood from 2 days before. I opened the door only halfway. "You shouldn't be here." Tessa's smile was rehearsed, the kind that tightens before it reaches the eyes. "We just wanted to talk, Mrs. Harper. Things got heated." "Liam feels terrible." Liam shifted, hands in his pockets, eyes darting to the camera above the door. He knew it was there. His voice came out strained. "Mom, please, let's not drag this out. We can fix this if you just help us." The word help carried a weight I'd heard too often. It always meant the same thing: money, forgiveness, another chance. "You didn't come to apologize," I said. "You came because you need something." Tessa's smile faltered. "We're trying to make our wedding right. My mother has expectations, and the venue—" I cut her off gently. "You don't owe your mother a show. You owe yourself honesty." That landed between us like a quiet storm. Tessa looked down, her fingers tightening on the folder she carried. Liam exhaled sharply, frustration flickering across his face. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I said, keeping my voice even. "You are." He laughed without humor. "You'd rather keep your savings in a dusty account than help your only son start his life?" I could feel my pulse rise, but I didn't move. "I gave you life already, Liam. The rest is your responsibility." The silence that followed was a living thing, stretching between us. Then Tessa spoke, softly, almost to herself. "She's not wrong." Liam turned, glaring at her. "Whose side are you on?" Tessa flinched. I saw it. A flicker of fear, or maybe clarity. Her mother's voice lived in her posture. Shoulders back, chin up. Never contradict the man beside you. But for the first time, she did. "Liam, your debt isn't her problem." His face hardened. "Don't start." I watched them unravel right there on my porch, the perfect couple cracking at the edges. I wanted to feel pity, but all I felt was distance, the kind that comes when you finally see truth after years of fog. I stepped aside just enough to let them leave. "You should go." As they turned away, Tessa's folder slipped from her hands. Paper spilled, catching the wind. Liam swore under his breath, kneeling to grab them, but one sheet slid across the porch to my feet. I bent and picked it up. Mortgage agreement. My address listed under collateral property. My name was typed in neat, bold letters beside a forged signature. I looked up. Tessa froze, her eyes wide. Liam snatched the paper from my hand. "That's nothing. Draft paperwork." "I see," I said calmly. "Drafts usually require consent." He stuffed the papers into the folder and pulled Tessa by the arm. "We'll talk later." When they left, I stood there for a long time, the cold air brushing against my face. The front door camera blinked quietly above me, recording everything. I went inside, locked the door, and placed my hand against the wooden surface, steadying my breath. The world had just shown me its final card. I scanned the copy I'd managed to glimpse into my memory. The bank name, the notary line, the forged date. Then I turned on my printer, opened a blank page, and typed it out from recollection. Julia would know what to do. That evening, I called her. She listened without interrupting, her tone precise. "Good. Keep that file. We'll need proof of intent. I'll loop in Ethan tomorrow." After the call, I stood by the window. Across the street, Marlene's porch light flickered on. I could see her sitting by the window with her book, peaceful, untouched by the storms other people create. For a moment, I envied her. Then I remembered that peace wasn't given. It was built. When the clock struck 9, I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, watching the faint reflection of my face in the glass. Outside, somewhere, Liam was probably blaming me for his troubles, twisting the story to fit his shame. But the truth no longer needed my defense. It had already been captured, sealed, and waiting. A sudden vibration on my phone broke the stillness, a message from an unknown number. "This is Victoria Riley. We should talk about your son. He's under a lot of pressure. Don't make things worse for him." I read it twice. The audacity almost made me laugh. Victoria, the woman whose charity luncheons were printed in glossy magazines, who treated money as a measure of worth, was now warning me. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a slow breath, saved the message, and placed the phone face down on the table. Outside, the sky deepened into indigo. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of tea. The warmth seeped through my fingers, grounding me. Through the window, I saw my own reflection, bruised but composed, and thought of the phrase that had followed me for days. "You're worth nothing." For the first time, it didn't echo. It ended. I carried the tea to the living room, sat beside Henry's photograph, and whispered, "They still think I'm the quiet one. They're about to learn what quiet can do." The camera light blinked once, as if agreeing. The morning Ethan arrived. The fog hung low over the field behind my house. I had always liked mornings like that. The air soft, the world still thinking about what it wanted to become. When I opened the door, he stood there in a gray jacket and a calm that felt older than his years. His handshake was steady, the kind that belonged to someone who had seen the worst in people, but still believed in evidence. "You must be Zoe," he said, offering a faint smile. "Julia told me you're the kind of woman who doesn't panic easily." "I've had practice," I replied. We sat at the table where all of this had begun. The same chair, the same faint scratch on the floor. I connected the external drive, and he leaned in as the video played. He didn't react with shock or pity, just quiet attention. When the footage ended, he nodded. "This will hold up. Camera placement, time code, angle, all solid. Did he know these were here?" "I don't think so," I said. "But now he does." "That might actually work in our favor," Ethan said. "If he thinks you're scared, he'll reach out again. We'll let him dig deeper." His calm precision steadied me. "Julia said you were good." He smiled faintly. "I'm thorough." He spent the next hour checking each file, verifying metadata, transferring copies onto encrypted drives. When he finished, he looked up. "I'll take these for forensic extraction. If anything was deleted, I'll recover it." "What happens next?" I asked it. "We wait," he said. "Let him contact you. Record every call, every message. Don't argue, don't defend yourself. Just listen." I nodded, understanding that patience was about to become my most dangerous weapon. That afternoon, Julia called again. Her voice was brisk, layered with the kind of control that comes from years of practice. "Ethan's confident about the evidence. We'll start drafting the complaint, but we need more than one incident for a pattern. If he reaches out about money, keep everything documented." "He will," I said. "He's desperate." She paused. "Desperation makes people sloppy. Be careful." After the call, I moved through the house, checking the angles of the cameras Ethan had tested earlier. One in the hallway, one in the kitchen, one by the porch light. Their quiet red glows made the house feel safer than it had in years. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt like strategy. That evening, I decided to bait the line. I transferred $1,000 into Liam's account, the smallest sum that could look like a gesture of peace, but would only feed his appetite. Then I sent a simple text. For groceries, take care of yourself. The reply came within an hour. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I could almost hear the smirk in his words. It hurt, but the hurt had edges now, sharp enough to cut through denial. I saved the message and forwarded it to Julia. Her response came quickly. Good. Leave it there. He'll circle back. The next day, I called Ethan to check in. He was already one step ahead. Your son's been making unusual withdrawals, he said. Casino in Burlington, online betting sites. He's deeper than I thought. Gambling? Classic pattern. Debt, pride, pressure. When the walls close in, they look for someone familiar to blame, usually family. It was strange hearing my life summarized like a police report, stripped of emotion. But maybe that was what I needed, to see the facts without the fog. Do you think he's dangerous? Ethan hesitated. He's angry and cornered. That combination can turn fast. Keep your phone near you. And if he shows up again, don't open the door. Just call me. I thanked him and hung up. My hand lingered on the phone. It had become my lifeline now, not to comfort but to caution. That night, I sat in my favorite chair with a cup of chamomile tea. The clock ticked softly, marking each second of waiting. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to protect Liam, from disappointment, from consequences, from himself. Somewhere along the way, I'd mistaken protection for love. The message came just after midnight. Can we meet tomorrow? I want to fix things. Tessa's with me. Please don't shut me out. I stared at the screen, hearing Julia's voice in my head. Document everything. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot and emailed it to Ethan. He responded within minutes. Perfect. Let him come. Don't change your routine. Just make sure the cameras are rolling. The word perfect echoed in my mind, not in triumph, but in quiet disbelief. None of this felt perfect. It felt like standing in a storm you'd been predicting for years, but still weren't ready to face. Before going to bed, I checked each lock, each camera angle, each beam of light on the porch. The night outside was silent, heavy with rain. I thought about Henry again, about how he used to say, "Sometimes stillness is louder than shouting." I understood him now in ways I never had before. I sat in the darkness, my reflection barely visible in the window glass. The faint red camera light blinked beside it, steady as a pulse. Tomorrow, he would come again, believing I was weak, believing silence meant surrender. He didn't know that I'd already turned silence into strategy. I woke before dawn, the sky a pale shade of blue-gray, like it was holding its breath. The house felt different that morning, expectant. I dressed carefully, not out of vanity, but for readiness. Soft cardigan, slacks, hair brushed back neatly. My cheek had faded from deep violet to a faint yellow bruise, a reminder that time can soften what it doesn't erase. I brewed tea and waited. By 8, I heard tires on gravel again. He was on time. When I opened the door, Liam stood there holding a manila folder. Tessa beside him. She looked tired. Her eyes ringed with sleeplessness. The tension between them was visible, like static in the air before lightning. I said nothing, only stepped aside. They entered as if they still belonged here. "I came to make things right," Liam said, setting the folder on the kitchen table. His voice was smoother than before. Practiced, rehearsed. "You can't just hang on to this house forever, Mom. It's too much for you. We found a way you could transfer ownership safely and still live here. Tessa's fingers brushed the folder. It's just a formality, she said quickly. A security measure for the wedding loan. I sat opposite them, letting the words settle. Security, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. He smiled, that same boyish grin he used to win over teachers and neighbors. I talked to a financial advisor. This is a simple equity release. It'll actually protect your assets. I opened the folder slowly, scanning the document as if my eyes were tired. Inside, the forged signature looked almost perfect. Almost. My name, written in a hand that tried too hard to mimic calm. I traced it with my finger, silent. Then I looked up at him. You've grown skilled at pretending to care. Liam's face darkened. Don't start again. I'm trying to fix this. No, I said. You're trying to cover it. Tessa shifted uneasily, glancing between us. Her hand trembled as she adjusted her purse. Liam, maybe we should... He cut her off sharply. She owes me this. I took care of her after Dad died. You took care of my grief, not me, I said softly. There's a difference. The air between us thickened. I could feel the pulse of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of the security camera above the door. It caught everything, the angle of his jaw, the glint in his eyes, the sound of my heartbeat in the quiet. I reached for the teapot, poured 3 cups and pushed one toward each of them. My hand was steady. Drink, I said. You've had a long drive. Tessa hesitated, then took the cup with both hands. Liam didn't. He leaned forward, his voice low. Sign it, Mom. Let's stop pretending this is about anything but pride. Pride? I said. You call it pride when a person refuses to be stolen from. He laughed under his breath. You're still dramatic. I smiled faintly. No, just awake. I stood up and walked to the counter. My heart was beating faster now, but it wasn't fear. It was clarity. You know, I said quietly, I used to record heartbeats for a living. Sometimes the strongest heart sounded weak at first, until you listened long enough. He frowned, confused. What are you talking about? Nothing, I said. Just old habits. When they left half an hour later, the folder was still on the table. Tessa had forgotten it. Or maybe she'd wanted to. I waited until their car disappeared down the road before I touched it again. My hands didn't shake this time. I flipped through the pages, scanning every signature, every notary seal, every lie. Then I carried it to my desk and began scanning each sheet into my computer. The sound of the scanner, slow, methodical, felt like justice taking shape. When Julia picked up my call, I didn't bother with greetings. He brought forged papers, I said. Her voice hardened. Do you have copies? I scanned them already. Good, she said. That's intent to defraud. Keep the originals safe. We'll handle the rest. After the call, I sent the files to Ethan. Within an hour, he replied with a short message. Got them. Tracking the source printer. He won't see this coming. Outside, the fog had lifted. The fields shimmered with sunlight, and the wind carried the scent of pine. I stepped onto the porch, the cool air filling my lungs. For the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks under pressure, but the kind built on truth. From across the street, Marlene waved from her garden. You doing all right, Zoe? I nodded. Better than yesterday. She smiled, then returned to her flowers. Simple gestures from good people. That was what steadied the world. Back inside, I replayed the camera footage from the visit. Every word, every gesture, preserved in perfect detail. When I reached the moment Tessa dropped the folder, I paused the video. Her eyes had darted toward me, wide, uncertain, not guilt, fear, fear of what he'd become. I watched that single frame for a long time. Maybe she wasn't lost completely. Maybe, like me, she was just learning how silence could speak louder than defense. As the sun set, I labeled the new file. Visit Evidence Zoe 2. I saved it to the drive beside the first recording. The two sat together like twin anchors, holding my truth steady. Before bed, I walked to the porch, watching the last light fade behind the trees. The camera's red glow blinked softly above the door. It looked almost like a star, patient and unwavering. Tomorrow, I whispered to it, we start turning the tide. That night, long after the house had gone still, I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked softly, and the wind pushed against the windows like it was trying to remind me I wasn't alone. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the glow from the hallway camera painting a faint red halo on the floor. My laptop hummed beside me, the last document still open. I reached for my phone without thinking, scrolling through old messages, through years of conversations that felt like they belonged to another lifetime. Then I saw it. An old voicemail saved from years ago, dated 12 summers back. My thumb hovered before pressing play. The voice that came through the speaker was younger, clearer, full of life. Hey, Mom, I fixed the lawnmower. I'm gonna take you to dinner when I get paid this week. Love you, okay? Don't work too hard. The words filled the room like light seeping through cracks. I closed my eyes. I could still remember that day, the smell of cut grass, the way he laughed when the mower finally started, the way he hugged me with greasy hands and said I was his favorite person in the world. I pressed the phone to my chest and felt the sound vibrate through me. The echo of a boy who used to run through the house barefoot, who used to kiss my forehead goodnight. The same boy who had stood in this room days ago and told me I was worth nothing. Something inside me broke quietly, not the way glass breaks, but the way ice does when the sun touches it for the first time. I didn't cry. The tears had already done their work. What filled me instead was something cleaner, sharper, resolve. I replayed the voicemail once more, memorizing the sound of his laughter. Then I saved it under a new title, Before the Storm. I needed to keep that piece of him, the proof that there had once been good in him, that love had existed before pride took its place. When I finally stood, the first light of dawn had touched the edge of the curtains. I whispered, I still love you, but I won't protect your cruelty. And with that, I pressed delete on every other message. The morning began with a knock on my door and the quiet hum of certainty. Ethan stood there again, carrying a black case and a small thermos of coffee. The air outside was crisp, carrying the smell of wet pine and cold metal. He stepped inside without many words, his presence calm but focused. Let's get your truth in order, he said simply. We sat at the table, and I handed him the external drives I'd labeled carefully. He unpacked a small forensic laptop, connecting the cables with practiced precision. The camera footage flickered onto the screen, muted light, motion timestamps, everything crisp and traceable. Ethan watched the moment Liam's hand struck me, his jaw tightening but his voice steady. I'll create verified duplicates. Once I submit this chain of custody log, nothing can be contested in court. I nodded. You sound like you've done this too many times. He gave a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Enough to know justice moves slow, but it moves. We went through every second of footage, the confrontation, the visits, the signatures, even the trembling pause in Tessa's voice when she mentioned the mortgage. It was all there. Every moment he thought was private, captured in silent precision. The camera had never lied. It didn't need to. When the last clip ended, the house felt heavy with truth. Ethan closed his laptop and looked at me. "You did well, Zoe. Most people panic after something like this. You didn't." I looked down at my hands, folded neatly in my lap. I spent a lifetime cleaning up other people's panic. Nurses don't get to fall apart. He smiled quietly, then began packing up his equipment. "Julia and I will cross-reference this with your financial records. The combination of physical evidence and intent should make a solid case." Before he left, he handed me a small envelope. "Dr. Maureen Shaw," he said. "Julia thought you might need her. She's a trauma psychologist, expert witness, but she's good with people first." I accepted the card, the edges warm from his hand. "Thank you." After he drove off, Iho sat on the porch for a long while, listening to the distant sound of birds breaking the silence. The world looked ordinary again, but nothing about me felt ordinary anymore. The bruise on my cheek had faded into a dull memory, yet the ache beneath it remained, something deeper than skin. By noon, I called Dr. Shaw. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "Julia briefed me," she said. "If you're comfortable, we can meet virtually first. I want to document your condition and emotional state when the incident occurred." "That's fine," I replied. When the video call began, she appeared on screen. Silver hair, kind eyes, the quiet authority of someone who had listened to too many broken stories. "Telman," she said gently, "what do you remember most from that night?" I hesitated, then said, "The silence afterward. Not the pain, not the shouting, just the quiet. It was so loud I could hear my heartbeat." She nodded. "That silence isn't emptiness. It's your mind protecting itself. Don't fear it." We spoke for nearly an hour. I told her about the cameras, about the way I'd begun to see them as guardians rather than machines. She smiled faintly. "You're taking control of your narrative, Zoe. That's not revenge. That's survival with intention." Her words lingered long after the call ended. I saved the video session file in my documents folder. Julia would want it for the record. Late that evening, Julia called. "We're ready," she said. "The evidence chain is complete. Ethan's extracted audio to clarify speech patterns, aggression, threat tone, admission. We'll file the complaint in 48 hours. I breathed slowly, letting her words settle. 48 hours, I repeated. 2 days, she confirmed. It'll go to the local prosecutor first, then the Domestic Violence Division. Detective Sarah Klein will be assigned once the warrant request is processed. I looked at the glowing red camera light across the room. Then it's almost time. Julia paused. "Are you afraid?" I thought about it carefully. "Not of him," I said. "Only of what it means to stop being his mother for a while." "That's not what this is," she said softly. "You're teaching him what love looks like when it refuses to enable harm." After the call, I walked through the house, turning off lights one by one. The silence that followed felt cleaner, sharper, almost sacred. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the reflection of the moon through the window. In the corner of the room, the camera's red dot blinked once, slow and patient. It didn't feel invasive anymore. It felt like truth breathing quietly in the dark, waiting to be seen. I whispered into the stillness. "You said I was worth nothing. You were wrong. I was worth recording." Then I turned off the lamp, leaving only the soft hum of the machine. the gentle echo of a house finally beginning to speak for itself. 2 days passed, and each hour felt like a held breath. I spent the time pruning the hydrangeas in the yard and sorting through old recipes, small rituals that gave structure to waiting. But under that quiet, something restless had begun to move, a current of tension threading through every minute. The world outside went on as usual, but I knew somewhere Liam was unraveling. It started with a phone call from Ethan. "We found more," he said. His tone was flat, professional, but beneath it was a thread of gravity. Credit card statements, online betting accounts, 3 payday loans. He's borrowed from private lenders. Some of them have criminal records. My throat tightened. "He's gambling again." "Yes," Ethan said softly. 40,000 in debt. Maybe more. And they're closing in. He's desperate, Zoe. That's why he's pushing so hard for your money. I thanked him and hung up, staring out the window. Across the yard, the wind moved through the trees like something searching. The ache in my chest wasn't just fear, it was recognition. I'd seen this pattern before, not in my son, but in patients years ago, people trapped in cycles of dependency, lying not because they were evil, but because truth had become unbearable. By mid-afternoon, the first message came. "Mom, please. I made mistakes. I just need a chance to fix it. I swear this is the last time." I didn't reply. Julia's voice echoed in my head. "Document everything." I took a screenshot, saved it, then set the phone face down. At dusk, another message arrived. This one longer. "You don't understand. They're threatening me. If you cared, you'd help. I could lose everything." The guilt struck like a reflex, the kind that years of motherhood had wired into me. I walked to the kitchen and stood there, watching the last of the daylight fade. I almost typed back, almost softened. Then I saw the red glow of the hallway camera in my reflection, steady as a heartbeat. I put the phone away. An hour later, my laptop pinged. A new email appeared, sent from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should see this." When I opened it, there were photos, grainy, taken at night. Liam, standing outside a rundown bar, exchanging cash with 2 men I didn't know. The images were time-stamped from a week ago. My pulse quickened. I knew who had sent them. Ethan didn't wait for permission when the truth mattered. The email had one line beneath the photos. "He's in deeper than he's telling you." I closed the laptop and sat back, the room spinning slightly. Somewhere between shame and sorrow, I found resolve. I printed the photos and placed them in a small folder labeled Liam, Debt. When I looked at the name written there, my stomach twisted. A mother shouldn't need to build a file like that. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. Not Ethan this time, Tessa. She stood there, pale and trembling, her hair uncombed, eyes red. "Mrs. Harper," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't know where else to go." I let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, clutching her phone like it was her only anchor. "He's losing it," she said. "The calls, the screaming, the people he owes. He said you're the reason everything's falling apart." I poured her tea and waited. She wiped her eyes. "He showed me a fake loan document last night. Said he could clear everything if I convinced you to sign the house over. I told him no. He threw a chair." Her voice broke. "I don't even recognize him anymore." I looked at her carefully. "You're afraid of him too." She nodded, hands trembling. "I thought he just needed help. My mother kept saying he was ambitious, that we were lucky to have someone so driven. But he's not driven, he's drowning. The kettle hissed softly behind us. I took a slow breath. Tessa, I said, if you want to help him now, tell the truth. To me, to the police, to yourself. That's the only thing left. She looked at me through tears. Would you really turn him in? He's your son. I'd rather lose him to justice than to guilt, I said quietly. She sat in silence for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If they ask, I'll tell them what I saw. Before she left, I walked her to the door. He'll come again, I said. When he does, don't follow. Let the law handle him. When she drove away, I stood there watching until the road was empty. Then I turned back to the house, to the stillness that had become my companion. The phone buzzed again that night. You think you're better than me? You'll regret this. I saved the message and placed my phone beside the laptop. The red light of the camera blinked once in the reflection of the window, catching the faint glimmer of my face. I didn't flinch. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, low and steady. I whispered to the dark, "Let it come." The rain began before sunset, soft at first, then relentless. It drummed against the roof like a warning I already understood. I had set my phone to record, the cameras to continuous mode, every door locked. The air inside felt charged, heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I knew he would come. It was only a matter of when. By the time I heard the car tires screeching against the gravel, the sky was almost black. Headlights cut through the rain, casting sharp beams against the porch. I didn't move. My heartbeat was steady. He slammed the car door and shouted before reaching the steps. "Open up, Mom! We're done playing games!" I didn't open. I stood near the hallway, out of sight but close enough to hear every word. The sound of fists pounding against wood echoed through the house. "I know you can hear me!" His voice cracked, rage and fear intertwined. "You want to ruin me? You want to make me look like some monster?" I took a slow breath. He was unraveling exactly as Julia and Ethan had said he would. The pounding grew louder. "You think you're worth something now? You're nothing without me." That sentence, almost the same as before, hit like a cold wind. But this time, I didn't flinch. The words didn't sink into my skin. They slid off, harmless. When I didn't respond, he began shouting into the storm. "You think your fancy lawyer scares me? You think the cops care about some old woman?" Thunder answered him. The rain grew heavier, drowning out his voice until all I could hear was noise. Then came the crash, wood splintering, glass breaking. He had forced the door. I stepped back slowly, my phone still recording. The camera above the hallway caught him in full view, drenched, wild-eyed, fury spilling from every movement. He kicked over a chair, knocked over a vase. Water dripped from his clothes onto the wooden floor, pooling beneath his shoes. "You did this!" he shouted, pointing at me. "You turned everyone against me." I met his gaze, calm and steady. "No, Liam, you did that yourself." He froze for a heartbeat, then lunged forward. I didn't run. I moved behind the table, putting distance between us, my hand subtly pressing the emergency button on my phone. The tiny chime confirmed what he didn't hear, a silent alert to Ethan and Julia. "Stop," I said sharply. "You're being recorded." He hesitated, his eyes darting to the red light above the doorway. It blinked once, bright in the dark room. He turned toward it, furious, shouting, "You think that camera makes you safe?" His hand grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and threw it toward the wall. It shattered, sparks scattering across the floor. The camera didn't move. It watched, patient, impartial, capturing everything he was trying to hide. I backed away, breathing evenly, keeping my voice low. You should leave before you do something you can't undo. He laughed bitterly. Undo? There's nothing left to undo. His voice cracked again, the sound of someone already broken. You ruined me. Lightning flashed, illuminating the bruise on his temple, the bloodshot eyes, the tremor in his hands. For a moment, I saw not the man who hurt me, but the frightened boy who used to hide behind my legs during storms. But pity had no place here. Not tonight. Liam, I said softly, I hope one day you understand that love doesn't mean rescue. That only enraged him more. He stepped closer, knocking over the table. The teacup I'd left there earlier shattered on the floor. He stopped suddenly, breathing hard, then turned toward the door. You think this is over? You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret everything. He stormed out into the rain, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls trembled. The sound of the car engine roared, tires spinning against the mud. Then silence returned, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water from the shattered lamp. I stood still for a long time, letting the quiet wrap around me. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. The cameras had seen everything. The file names would tell the story better than any words I could say. When Ethan arrived an hour later, soaked from the rain, he didn't need to ask. He saw the broken door, the overturned furniture, the calm on my face. You got it all? He asked. Yes, I said. Every second. He nodded, already pulling out his phone to notify Julia. This is it, Zoe. This is enough. I looked toward the doorway where my son had stood moments ago, shouting into the storm. The rain had stopped now, the air heavy and clean. I think, I said quietly, it's finally over for him. Ethan gave a solemn nod. 2 days, he said. That's all it takes now. As he left, I closed the door as best I could, leaning my forehead against the wood. The scent of rain still clung to the air, mixing with the faint trace of burnt metal from the lamp. The silence felt different this time, lighter, freer. In the reflection of the dark window, the camera light blinked once more, steady and certain. I whispered, the camera never lies, and neither do I. The sky had cleared after the storm, leaving the air sharp and quiet. I hadn't slept much in 2 days. My house still smelled faintly of rain and broken porcelain, but it no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like evidence. Every mark, every splinter, every object in its place telling the truth. I sat at the kitchen table that morning with a cup of black coffee and my laptop open. The folder labeled recordings had grown heavier, as if even the computer understood what it held. At exactly 9, the phone rang. It was Julia. Her voice carried the kind of steadiness people cling to in courtrooms. Zoe, she said. The warrant was approved. Detective Klein's team is on standby. Ethan delivered the footage and the written statements. They're moving forward today. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I doubted it, but because hearing it made everything real. So soon? You built a case that doesn't need defending, she said gently. The prosecutor signed off this morning, 2 days after the incident. Exactly as planned. I exhaled slowly, watching steam rise from my coffee. Where will they find him? His address hasn't changed, Julia replied. Ethan confirmed he's been at Tessa's apartment. She's cooperating now. That poor girl, I murmured. She didn't know what she was walking into. She does now, Julia said. She turned over the forged paperwork and gave a full statement. That helped more than you can imagine. I looked at the clock, feeling every second crawl forward. What do I do? Nothing, she said. Just stay home. Let the police handle it. You've already done enough. The call ended, and I sat there listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own breath. The camera light above the hallway blinked rhythmically, as if counting down the minutes. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Then another. I stood and moved to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to see the street. 2 patrol cars rolled slowly past Marlene's house and stopped near the corner. The lights painted the wet pavement in red and blue flashes. Marlene stepped out onto her porch, confused, holding her gardening gloves. She looked toward my window, our eyes meeting for just a moment. I gave a small nod. She didn't need to ask. The radio in one of the police cars crackled. Then I saw him. Liam. He was standing outside Tessa's building across the street, a phone in his hand, still trying to talk his way out of something. A few neighbors had gathered, drawn by the commotion. One of them held up a phone, recording. For years, I had been the one under scrutiny. Now the lens had turned. Detective Sarah Klein stepped out of the unmarked car. I recognized her immediately from the photograph Julia had sent. A woman with a calm authority, her hair pulled back, expression unreadable. She approached Liam with quiet purpose. Her voice wasn't audible from where I stood, but I could see his reaction. Defensiveness first, then confusion, then disbelief as she handed him the papers. He shouted something, shaking his head, gesturing wildly. The officers moved closer. Sarah remained composed, waiting for him to finish before signaling to the others. When they stepped forward, his voice rose louder, frantic, pleading. The neighbors' phones stayed up, recording everything. He tried to pull away. The officers didn't let him. In seconds, the scene shifted from protest to restraint. Cuffs, commands, movement. It all happened beneath the gray Vermont sky, while the red and blue lights painted the quiet houses around him. I stood behind the curtain, watching it unfold through the glass. My breath fogged the window slightly. He turned once, just once, and looked toward my house. I don't know if he saw me, but his expression changed. Not rage, not shock. Something else. Recognition, maybe. The realization that truth had been standing still the whole time, waiting for him to run out of lies. The officers guided him into the car. Tessa stood a few feet away, pale and shaking. She was crying, but she didn't move closer. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder, saying something I couldn't hear. When the car door closed, the sound was faint but final. The lights flickered once, then began to fade as the vehicles pulled away, their reflections trailing across the wet road like ribbons of color. I stayed at the window long after they disappeared. Marlene was still on her porch, her face solemn. She didn't wave this time. She just pressed a hand to her heart, a silent gesture of solidarity. I nodded back. The house behind me was quiet again. The broken chair, the scattered shards of the lamp, the faint outline of water stains on the floor, each one a piece of the story now sealed by law. I turned to the hallway camera, its small red light still glowing. "It's done," I whispered. "They saw everything." The recording continued for a few seconds longer, capturing me standing there with the soft light from the window across my face. When I finally reached for the switch, I hesitated. Then I left it on. Some truths deserve to be remembered exactly as they are. Outside, a single police car remained at the end of the street. Its lights blinked once more before disappearing into the distance. The silence that followed was not empty. It was justice breathing. The morning after the arrest, The world seemed quieter, like the storm had drained all the noise out of it. I woke before sunrise and sat by the kitchen window, watching fog rise off the wet grass. Somewhere in the distance, a mourning dove called, its soft cooing folding into the stillness. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the heaviness pressing down on my chest. I still ached, yes, but it was an ache that came from release, not fear. By 8, Julia called. "He's in custody," she said. "They questioned him overnight. He's claiming it was an argument gone too far, that you provoked him." I smiled faintly at the absurdity. "And the video?" "They've seen it," she said. "Every second of it. Detective Klein presented the footage to the prosecutor this morning. There's no ambiguity left. It's assault and elder abuse. But that's not all." Her tone shifted slightly, a trace of anticipation. "Ethan dug deeper into the loans. Turns out one of them links to a fake startup scheme, a financial fraud network. Victoria Riley is involved." For a moment, I didn't breathe. "Tessa's mother?" "Yes," Julia said. "The company name appears on 2 of Liam's forged documents. It looks like she was using him to move funds through fraudulent accounts. Tessa found the same paperwork and handed it over last night. That's what broke the case wide open." I stood and moved to the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the yard. "So it's bigger than him." "It always was," Julia replied. "But your son's part in it sealed everything. The police are issuing subpoenas this week. Victoria's social status won't protect her now." I thought of Tessa, her trembling hands, her red eyes when she'd come to me that night. "How is she?" "She's safe," Julia said. "She's been cooperating since the arrest. Her statement was honest, detailed, and brave. She's agreed to testify. She even offered to pay for damages to your property." I sat down slowly. "She doesn't owe me that." "She said she needs to," Julia replied gently. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, listening to the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled down the road, and the neighborhood began to wake. Life had a way of continuing, even when yours had cracked open. Later that afternoon, Detective Klein stopped by. She was professional, composed, her presence grounding. She handed me an envelope. "Official notice of arrest and pending charges," she said. "You'll receive court dates soon." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." She studied me for a moment, her gaze kind but unflinching. "You did something most people can't," she said. "You stayed calm long enough for justice to catch up. That takes strength." "I didn't feel strong," I admitted. "You don't have to feel it for it to be true," she said softly, then tipped her head toward the porch. "He'll be arraigned tomorrow. You don't need to attend unless you want to." "I'll be there," I said. She nodded. "We'll have officers nearby, just in case, but I don't think he'll cause trouble anymore." After she left, I opened the envelope. The papers inside were formal, full of words like felony, fraud, abuse, arraignment. They should have made me feel vindicated, but what I felt instead was something quieter. Not triumph, closure. In the afternoon, Marlene came by with fresh muffins. "I saw the news," she said, setting the basket down. "They said he was part of some financial thing. You okay, hun?" I smiled. "Better than I expected." She sighed. "It's a hard thing, watching your own blood fall apart." "Yes," I said. "But sometimes people have to break before they see what they've done." That night, I couldn't help but check the evening news. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Local man and socialite investigated in elder fraud scheme." They showed a photograph of Liam being escorted into the courthouse, his hands cuffed, his face turned away from the camera. Another clip showed Victoria Riley exiting her estate, surrounded by reporters. She looked furious, cornered by a truth too public to deny. The reporter's voice was calm, almost clinical. Authorities confirmed that multiple counts of financial fraud, forgery, and elder exploitation are under review. Investigations remain ongoing. I turned off the television and sat back in the dim light. The image of Liam's bowed head lingered on the dark screen, a ghost of choices that couldn't be undone. Somewhere deep inside, I felt both grief and gratitude. Grief for the boy he once was, gratitude for the woman I'd become. My phone buzzed once more before midnight. A message from Tessa. "He's been charged." I told the truth, Mrs. Harper. "I'm sorry for everything." I typed back slowly. "Thank you for being brave. It's not too late to start again." Her reply came a few seconds later. "Neither for you." I looked toward the hallway camera light blinking faintly in the dark. The red glow had become something familiar, almost comforting. I whispered, "No, not too late." The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the kind of silence that comes when justice finally exhales. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, the kind of sterile air that makes people whisper even when they don't have to. I arrived early, my hands folded around a thermos of tea I hadn't touched. Julia met me in the lobby, her heels clicking softly against the tile. "He's in interrogation now," she said. "Detective Klein's leading. We'll go in soon." I nodded. I hadn't seen Liam since that night in the rain. The bruise on my cheek had faded, but the memory hadn't. It lived behind my ribs, quiet but alive. I wasn't afraid of facing him. I just didn't know what would be left to say. The security guard led us down a hallway lined with muted glass panels. Behind one of them, I saw him, my son, sitting at a metal table, his wrists cuffed loosely in front of him. His hair was unkempt, his eyes hollow. There was a kind of stillness around him I didn't recognize, like someone who had been emptied out. Detective Klein stood near the corner, calm, controlled, the faint hum of the recorder filling the room. She pressed the button. "This is Detective Sarah Klein. Case reference number 18B-VT-621. Present are Liam Harper, primary suspect, Julia Stanton, legal counsel for the victim, Mrs. Zoe Harper, and myself." Her voice carried no judgment, only fact. Liam shifted, looking up. His eyes landed on me. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize me, or maybe he didn't want to. I took a seat across the table. The chair was cold, grounding. Julia sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on a folder thick with evidence. Sarah began, her tone measured. "Mr. Harper, we've reviewed the security footage, phone records, and financial documents. You're charged with multiple counts of assault, elder exploitation, and fraud. Do you wish to make a statement?" Liam laughed softly, the sound brittle. "You make it sound like I planned all this." Sarah didn't respond. She pressed play on the small monitor beside her. The screen filled with grainy footage. My living room, the sound of rain, his voice shouting, "You're worth nothing." The moment of impact froze on the screen. His hand raised, my body recoiling. He looked away. "I don't need to see that." "You should," Sarah said quietly. "We all should." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "It got out of control. She kept pushing me." Julia interrupted sharply. "She asked you not to take her savings. That isn't provocation. That's protection." He fell silent. Sarah leaned forward. Your mother installed those cameras for safety. You turned her home into a crime scene. Do you understand the gravity of that?" His lips parted, but no words came out. He looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to find something familiar in my face. "Mom," he said finally, "I didn't mean to hurt you." I met his eyes. "But you did." Tears welled, but I didn't let them fall. "I gave you everything I knew how to give. Time, forgiveness, chances. I thought if I loved you hard enough, you'd find your way back." He stared at the table. I was drowning. The debts, the lies, it all got away from me. I nodded slowly. "And instead of reaching for help, you tried to pull me under." The room went silent except for the hum of the fluorescent light. He rubbed his face with his hands. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "Then maybe it's time you learn," I said softly. Sarah pressed stop on the recorder. The room filled with a heavy quiet. She glanced at Julia, then back at him. "Mr. Harper, do you wish to amend your statement?" Liam's voice was barely audible. "I did it. All of it. I forged the papers. I lied. I hit her. I thought she'd forgive me like always. I don't deserve that now." Sarah nodded once, writing something in her file. "For the record, that's a confession of guilt." She stood, signaled the officer outside, and stepped away to handle the paperwork. Julia gathered her folders but didn't move. It was just the two of us then, mother and son. The air between us thick with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. He looked up again, his voice breaking. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said. "I don't hate you, but I can't protect you from what you've done. That's not love anymore, Liam. That's denial." He nodded slowly, eyes red. "I'm sorry." The words sounded small, worn thin from use, but there was something different this time. Less defense, more surrender. I reached into my purse and pulled out a photograph. Him at 7 years old, smiling with a missing front tooth, holding a paper airplane. I placed it on the table. "Keep this," I said. "Remember the part of you that knew how to be kind." The officer returned, signaling the session was over. As they led him away, he turned one last time. "I wish I could start over." "You can," I said quietly, "but it has to begin without me." When he was gone, the room felt lighter. Julia placed a hand on my shoulder. "That was brave," she whispered. I stood, taking one last look at the empty chair across the table. The photograph was still there. I left it. Some things are meant to stay behind, to remind the past that it was real. As we walked out into the pale afternoon light, Sarah met us in the hallway. "He signed the statement," she said. "It's official now." I nodded, breathing in the sterile air. "Then we're done here." Outside, the courthouse steps glistened from last night's rain. Each drop sparkled under the faint sun, like small fragments of something once broken now reflecting the light. The day after the confession, the house felt almost too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had witnessed every version of my life. Mother, widow, victim, survivor. The window was open just a crack, enough to let in the smell of rain-soaked earth and pine. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for the sound of tires in the driveway. There was no threat left, only the sound of my own breath, steady and deliberate. On the counter lay a stack of mail I hadn't touched in days. I went through it slowly. Bills, brochures, one letter with handwriting I recognized instantly. It was from my late husband, Henry. The envelope was yellowed with age, postmarked 12 years earlier. I tucked it into an old recipe book after his funeral and somehow forgotten it existed. My hands trembled as I slid the paper out. "My Zoe," it began, "if life ever becomes too loud, remember that silence isn't surrender. It's strength collecting itself. Promise me you'll never forget who you are, even when the world tries to make you small." The words blurred for a moment as tears filled my eyes. He'd written it before his last hospital stay, when he already knew his heart was failing. "You always take care of others. Just promise me that one day, you'll take care of yourself the same way." I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the familiar weight of his love, the kind that never demanded, never judged. It was as if he'd written it for this exact moment, years before either of us could have imagined what life would become. A soft knock pulled me back. When I opened the door, Dr. Maureen Shaw stood there, umbrella in hand and a gentle smile on her face. "I thought I'd stop by," she said. "Julia told me the arraignment went as expected." "It did," I said. "He confessed." She nodded, her eyes calm. "I read your statement. You chose your words carefully." "I didn't have many left," I admitted. "I just told the truth." We sat together in the living room, the light warm and golden through the curtains. She took a notebook from her bag, but didn't open it right away. "You know," she said softly, "trauma doesn't end with justice. It lingers until you decide what it means." I looked at the camera light above the doorway. It wasn't recording now, but its presence still comforted me. "It means I survived," I said, "and I didn't lose myself to anger." Maureen smiled faintly. "That's rare." "I didn't do it alone," I said. "Julia, Ethan, you, even Marlene. Everyone carried a piece of it." "Still," she said, "you were the one who chose silence over rage. That's the hardest kind of strength." For a long while, we just sat there listening to the soft hum of the house. The rain had started again, light and rhythmic, the same sound that had filled the night he was taken away. But it didn't frighten me anymore. It sounded almost kind now, like a lullaby played for peace instead of warning. Marlene stopped by later that afternoon with a basket of apples from her yard. "I heard about the hearing," she said. "You did what had to be done." I smiled. "It still hurts." "It should," she said gently. "Pain is proof you loved right, even when others didn't." She stayed for tea, and we talked about ordinary things, her garden, the coming frost, the neighbor's new dog. When she left, the house felt warmer, lived in again. That evening, I returned to the letter. I placed it inside a small wooden box along with the flash drive that held every recording. 2 different kinds of truth. One written in love, the other in evidence, both necessary. As the sun dipped below the trees, I walked out to the porch. The sky was painted in streaks of violet and gold, the kind of sunset that looked like forgiveness if forgiveness had a color. I thought of Liam, sitting somewhere behind concrete walls, and wondered if he was looking at the same sky. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him harm. I only hoped the silence would finally teach him what words never could. I closed my eyes and whispered to the fading light, "Henry, I kept your promise. I didn't let them make me small." The wind rustled through the trees, gentle and affirming. Inside, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The warmth of it spread through me as I sat by the window, the letter still open beside me. The last line glowed under the soft lamplight. "If they ever doubt your worth, remind them with quiet courage." I smiled, reading it again, letting the words settle into the deepest part of me. They no longer felt like advice. They felt like truth I'd earned. The camera in the hallway blinked once, though I hadn't turned it on. Maybe a trick of the power, maybe something else. Either way, it felt like a nod. From the universe, from Henry, from everything that had survived with me. For the first time in years, I went to bed without fear of waking to shouting or breaking glass. Only rain on the roof, soft and steady, carrying away what was left of the past. The courthouse was brighter than I remembered. High windows spilling light onto the polished floors, dust motes drifting like slow-moving thoughts. I arrived early, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to sit in the quiet before everything began. Julia met me at the front steps, her file tucked against her chest. "You don't have to speak," she said softly. "Just being here will say enough." I nodded. I hadn't prepared a statement. Words felt unnecessary now. The truth was already out in the world, documented, replayed, signed and sealed. This was the part where I didn't need to fight anymore. Inside, the courtroom filled slowly. Reporters gathered near the back. The air buzzed with whispers. I took a seat in the second row behind the prosecution table, where Julia arranged her papers in precise, deliberate order. Detective Klein sat nearby, her expression composed, her posture calm. Ethan entered, moments later, giving me a brief nod before taking his seat in the gallery. When they brought Liam in, the noise dimmed into silence. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched beneath the county-issued gray. His wrists were free this time, but his steps were cautious, almost uncertain. For a moment, I didn't see the man who had screamed at me. I saw the boy who used to tug my sleeve at the grocery store, asking for candy. The memory flickered and vanished as quickly as it came. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The proceedings began. The prosecutor read through the charges in a voice that carried authority but not cruelty. Assault in the second degree, financial fraud, elder abuse, forgery. Each word landed like a measured heartbeat, steady and irrefutable. When asked for his plea, Liam's voice trembled. "Guilty." A murmur spread across the room. The judge's gavel tapped once, restoring order. Julia's eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a faint, quiet smile. The prosecutor continued, presenting the case methodically. The defendant's actions were recorded in full on security footage, dated June 21st and June 23rd. The victim's response demonstrated restraint, composure, and a clear attempt to de-escalate. The evidence leaves no doubt. When the video played, the room held its breath. The sound of his voice filled the speakers, harsh, cruel, echoing in the vaulted space. I didn't watch the screen. I had already lived it once. Instead, I looked at the jurors. Their faces tightened, jaws clenched. Some shook their heads. Even the court reporter paused briefly before catching up to the words. When the footage ended, the silence was almost unbearable. The judge cleared her throat. "Mrs. Harper, would you like to make a statement?" Julia turned to me, waiting for a nod. But I didn't stand. I folded my hands on my lap and simply said, "No, Your Honor." The judge regarded me for a moment, then nodded. "Very well." Julia stood instead, her tone steady and deliberate. "Your Honor, the victim's silence is her statement. Everything she endured and documented speaks louder than any words she could offer today. Her choice not to speak is a reflection of her dignity, not her fear." The judge's eyes softened. "Understood." Liam shifted in his seat, staring at the floor. I could see the flicker of realization, the understanding that this wasn't revenge. It was consequence. The courtroom's quiet pressed down like a weight. When the verdict came, it was delivered without hesitation. On all counts, guilty. The sound of the gavel struck like thunder, final and unyielding. Liam's head dropped into his hands. The chains clinked softly, a sound that would stay with me long after the day ended. The judge continued, her tone measured. Sentencing will include mandatory counseling and restitution for financial damages. In light of the defendant's cooperation and confession, the court will also recommend rehabilitation programs within the correctional system. Justice is not only punishment, it is correction, Julia whispered. That's fair. I nodded. It's enough. When the session adjourned, people began to rise, their murmurs filling the air again. I didn't move. I sat there, hands clasped, watching as the officers guided Liam toward the exit. Just before he reached the door, he turned. His eyes met mine. There was no anger there, only exhaustion, and something that looked almost like apology. I gave him a single nod, nothing more. As he disappeared through the door, I finally exhaled. The sound left my body like a long-forgotten breath, carrying with it everything I'd been holding since that first night. Julia gathered her papers, closing the folder with a soft click. You did it, she said quietly. No, I replied. Truth did. Ethan walked over, his expression gentle. You can rest now. I smiled faintly. Rest isn't what I want. Peace is. As we stepped out into the courtyard, the sun was just beginning to lower, casting long golden shadows across the courthouse steps. Reporters waited near the gate, but Julia raised a hand to keep them back. I kept walking, the sound of my shoes steady against the stone. At the top of the stairs, I stopped and looked back at the building. Solid, unmoving, a place where truth had found its voice. The same silence that once felt heavy now felt clean, almost sacred. Julia touched my shoulder gently. You ready to go home? I nodded. Home, I said softly. Yes, it's time. As we walked toward her car, a faint breeze lifted through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and paper. It reminded me of Henry, of his letter, of every promise I had ever kept to myself. Justice didn't roar that day. It whispered. And in that whisper, I found everything I'd been waiting for. It was 3 weeks after the verdict when Julia came by my house again. The late autumn sun was low and amber, slipping through the bare branches in quiet streaks. She carried an envelope in her hand, her expression soft but unreadable. This came through the correctional facility, she said, placing it on the table. They screened it first, but it's from him. I stared at the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakably his, strong, uneven, rushed. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My fingers traced the edge of the paper, and I thought about all the words I had wished for once, the apologies I had rehearsed in my head. I told myself I wouldn't need them anymore, but now that one had finally arrived, my hands were shaking. Do you want me to stay? Julia asked gently. I shook my head. No, this one I read alone. When she left, I sat by the window, the letter still unopened. Outside, the sky had begun to darken, the edges of the horizon turning violet. I took a slow breath and tore the seal. Mom, it began. They say writing helps you see things clearer. I don't know if that's true, but it's all I can do now. The cell is small. The walls are quiet. Maybe that's what I deserve. The handwriting wavered. The ink smudged in a few places. I keep thinking about the night it happened. The way you didn't fight back. The way you just looked at me. I thought silence meant I'd won. I know now it meant I'd already lost. You didn't yell, and somehow that hurt worse than if you had. It still does. I stopped reading for a moment, pressing the paper to my chest, feeling the faint pulse beneath it. I was angry at the wrong things, Mom. At debt, at failure, at myself. You were just the nearest mirror. When I said you were worth nothing, I was talking to the part of me that felt like nothing. I see that now. Tears blurred the words. I kept reading, my voice silent but steady in my head. They make us work here, fixing furniture, painting walls. Sometimes I think of your kitchen table, how many times we sat there. I remember the sound of your laugh when I spilled juice as a kid. I don't know when I stopped trying to be that boy. He had signed it simply, Liam. No excuses, no promises, no grand gestures, just truth in its smallest, most human form. I folded the letter carefully, smoothing the creases with my fingers. My heart ached, but not the same way it used to. The pain had softened into something closer to understanding. I didn't forgive him completely. Forgiveness wasn't a switch to be flipped. It was a path, and this letter was just the first step on it. But I did feel something close to release. The kind of peace that comes when someone finally names the wound out loud. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the dry leaves against the porch railing. I stood and placed the letter in the small wooden box beside Henry's. The two envelopes sat together, the past and the future, side by side, both written in love, both born from loss. I whispered to the quiet house, "You kept your promise, Henry." He found his way back to words. The hallway camera light blinked softly, casting a faint red glow across the room. I smiled, wiping away the tears that still clung to my face. For the first time, the silence didn't ache. It felt full. Winter was late that year. The first snow didn't fall until early December, soft flakes drifting down like ash from an old fire finally gone out. I spent the morning trimming the last of the roses before the frost claimed them, my hands wrapped in worn gloves, the air cool against my cheeks. Life had begun to feel ordinary again. Quiet mornings, steady rhythms, no storms, no shouting, no fear. Ordinary, I realized, could be its own kind of miracle. Julia stopped by that afternoon, bundled in her wool coat, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "It's official," she said, handing me a folder. "The court approved the foundation. Status. The Harper Care Fund is live." I opened the folder and read the first line aloud. A community fund providing support for elder abuse survivors and grants for young nurses in rural health care. My throat tightened. "It's really happening." "You made it happen," she said. "Your case set a precedent, Zoe. The prosecutor used it in a seminar last week. How evidence, not anger, built the strongest justice." I smiled softly. That's a legacy I can live with. We talked for a while about logistics, bank accounts, partnerships, the first group of applicants. When she left, the house felt warm despite the cold outside. I sat at my desk, filling out the last few forms, my hands steady, my heart calm. By evening, the sky turned a deep blue, the kind that makes the snow glow. I lit a candle near Henry's photo and whispered, "We did it, love. Something good grew from all that pain." The next morning brought a letter, this time from Tessa. It was short, handwritten in careful script. "Mrs. Harper, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. Your strength helped me see what I refused to face. I've started counseling and I've moved out of my mother's house. I don't know what redemption looks like yet, but I hope it starts with honesty. If you're ever willing, I'd like to see you. Maybe when the snow melts." Tessa. I read it twice, then a third time. Her words carried something fragile yet sincere. I placed the letter beside Liam's in the wooden box. Different writers, different pains, but both reaching towards something human again. Later that week, I met with Ethan and Maureen at the community center in town, the same building where I'd once volunteered for flu clinics years ago. It smelled of coffee and old wood, and the radiator hissed quietly like it was listening in. Ethan handed me a stack of papers. We have the first few applicants for grants, 3 nursing students, 1 single mother returning to school, and 1 veteran. Veteran? I asked. Name's Tommy Hayes, he said. 34, works nights at the hospital in Burlington. Says he wants to specialize in elder care because he watched his grandmother go through something similar to your case. Said your story gave him the courage to apply. My eyes stung. Then let's start with him. Maureen smiled, sliding her pen across the approval line. You've turned pain into purpose, Zoe. That's healing work. It doesn't feel like heroism, I said. Just setting things right. Maybe that's what heroism really is, she replied gently. As I drove home that evening, snow began to fall again. The headlights caught the flakes like sparks in the dark. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace so deep it frightened me a little. Not because it was fragile, but because it was real. When I got home, I brewed a pot of tea and stood by the window, watching the snow cover the yard where so much had happened. The porch light glowed softly against the white, and for a moment, it looked like a new beginning. A knock came at the door. I opened it to find Tessa standing there, bundled in a dark coat, her hair dusted with snow. She looked different, smaller somehow, humble. I'm sorry to come unannounced, she said, voice trembling. I wanted to say thank you in person. I stepped aside. Come in, dear. It's cold out. She entered slowly, her eyes scanning the familiar walls. I keep thinking about that day, she said quietly. How I stood by and let him talk to you that way. I thought I was helping him. I wasn't. I was helping his lies. I poured her tea, letting her speak without interruption. She wiped her eyes. I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to live differently. If you can't forgive me, I understand. I reached across the table, resting my hand gently on hers. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, I said softly. It's about releasing what no longer serves you. I don't carry anger toward you, Tessa. I just hope you keep walking the right path. Her tears came freely then, quiet and relieved. Thank you, she whispered. We sat together for a long while, 2 women bound by the same wound, slowly stitching it closed with honesty. When she left, the snow was still falling, soft and endless, erasing footprints almost as soon as they were made. I stood at the window, watching her taillights fade into the dark. The world outside was silent, blanketed in white, waiting to be rewritten. I whispered to the night, maybe in spring. The candle by Henry's photo flickered as if in agreement, and for the first time, I didn't just feel peace, I felt renewal. The snow began to melt by late March. The earth beneath it was soft again, damp with life, ready to start over. The vineyard on the edge of town had begun to bud, and the air smelled faintly of mud and promise. I spent most mornings walking along the back fence, tracing the rhythm of a world that no longer felt broken. I didn't need to rush anywhere. I didn't need to hide. One quiet morning, I brewed my tea and sat at my desk to organize the foundation's files. I'd been recording a short note for our donors, thanking them for believing in second chances when I accidentally opened one of the old folders, the security footage archive. My hand hovered over the mouse. I hadn't watched any of the videos since the trial. They'd served their purpose, told their truth. But something inside me whispered, "Look again." So I did. The screen flickered, the timestamp blinking faintly in the corner. There I was, frozen in time, standing in the living room as Liam shouted. The rain outside, the flash of his arm, the chaos that followed. I let it play, my breath steady, detached. But as I watched, something caught my eye, something small that I'd never noticed before. In the corner of the frame, just beneath the edge of the table, something glittered as it fell to the floor. A thin silver bracelet. My bracelet. The one Henry had given me the year Liam was born, engraved with tiny initials, LH. I paused the video. The camera's light reflected off the silver chain, catching it mid-fall. My breath caught in my throat. All that time, all those viewings, I'd missed it. I leaned closer to the screen, tracing the image with my fingertip. That bracelet had been on my wrist the night he hurt me, and I must have lost it in the chaos. The police had bagged evidence, cleaned, documented, restored order, but somehow this small thing had slipped through unnoticed. I stood and walked to the cabinet near the stairs. Inside, tucked behind a stack of old invoices and utility bills, was a small evidence box Julia had returned to me after the trial. I opened it gently. The scent of paper and dust filled the air. Inside were the flash drives, a few photos, and there, half hidden under a manila envelope, was the bracelet. The silver was tarnished, a faint bend along one side, but the engraving was still clear. LH. I traced the letters with my thumb, and memories flooded back. The hospital room where Henry had given it to me, Liam only a few days old, wrapped in a blanket, his tiny hand grasping my finger. Henry had laughed then, saying, "We'll call it Love Holds, not just initials." Reminder. I closed my hand around the bracelet. For a moment, I could almost hear his voice again. Love holds. I sat down and fastened it around my wrist. It fit the same as it always had, cool against my skin, grounding. I looked at the paused frame on the computer screen, the frozen image of a terrible night, and realized something unexpected. That bracelet had been there the whole time, even in the darkest moment. Love had still been present, small but unbroken. The camera never lies, but sometimes it doesn't show everything. Sometimes you have to look twice to see what survived. Outside, sunlight began to spill through the window, landing across the table in long golden stripes. I let the video continue to play until the moment after he left, until the house went quiet again, until I appeared on screen standing in that silence, calm and breathing. I paused there, not at the violence, not at the chaos, at the peace that followed. I whispered, "This is the part that matters." Later that afternoon, I walked into town to drop off some papers at the foundation's office. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of melting snow and distant pine. As I crossed the square, I saw a young nurse leaving the clinic, Tommy Hayes, our first grant recipient. He waved when he saw me, a smile bright and sincere. "Mrs. Harper," he called. "I got the acceptance letter. I start the elder care program next week." I smiled. "Make them proud, Tommy." "I'll make you proud," he said, still grinning. Then, almost shyly, "Thank you for believing in people like me." I watched him walk away, his steps full of hope. For a long time, I thought justice was the end of the story. But standing there, I realized it was only the beginning. That night, I returned home and sat on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders. The air was cool, the stars sharp against the velvet sky. I thought of Henry, of Liam, of everything that had been broken and somehow mended into something new. The bracelet glinted in the soft porch light, the engraving catching the glow. Love holds. I touched it gently, whispering, "Yes, it does." Behind me, the house was still. The camera in the hallway blinked its quiet red light, the same as it had every night. But this time, it didn't feel like protection. It felt like witness, a reminder that truth, once spoken, never really disappears. I closed my eyes, letting the silence settle around me. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was peace, earned deep and mine. When the wind shifted, it carried a faint whisper through the trees, so soft I almost missed it. "It's never too late." I smiled, watching the last light fade from the sky. "No," I said softly, "it never was." And in that quiet moment, under the fading day, I finally let go, not of love, not of memory, but of the weight that had once made both feel impossible to hold. The camera light blinked one last time before the power timer shut it off. The screen went dark. The house exhaled. Justice had spoken. Healing had stayed. Love, quiet, steady, and unbroken, held on.